So let me start for the basic reason that why we generally say, or why we normally call it a research as a qualitative research or as a quantitative research. It means, what's the basic reason that research have been differentiated in two streams, which is qualitative stream and which is quantitative stream, and why a particular discipline is just claiming, are most of us that claim that, for example, one kind of research belongs to a particular discipline, whereas the other kind of research belongs to other discipline. For example, most of us consider that qualitative kind of research is basically concerned with the social sciences and psychology and sociology. It's least concerned with the management sciences or computer science or engineering. Whereas on the other way around, most of us think that quantitative kind of study is more about the computer science, finance, and this kind of thing, right? Or somewhere even in some cases, some of the colleagues, especially from the computer science and engineering, they think that the both kind of research, whether it's a qualitative or a quantitative, they are like just ordinary until unless you don't come up with certain solutions. But anyway, let me start with the fact that what are the basis of our scientific inquiry. For example, whenever we are conducting a research, what are the certain basis for concluding that research? What are the basis or what are the particular things upon which or by investigating which we reach upon the certain conclusions? So for example, if I have a certain I have formed certain hypothesis, or I want to conduct a research upon like the economic impacts of the coronavirus or the socio-economic impacts of the coronavirus. So until unless I do not get the information, until unless I do not get the data of the population, and that data is not analyzed, I won't be able to address my research question. So it means that now what kind of data I'm getting from my respondents. Like for example, if the data is subjective, if the data is in term of for example, these are the opinions of the people, if the data is in the form of maybe the perception of the people, so obviously I will not be able to deal with that data, I will not be able to deal with that information, or I will not be able to process that information with any quantitative way. So it means that the information which I have obtained from the respondents, that information is subjective. That's why I have to process that information with the help of any subjective tool of inquiry or any subjective tool of research. It means that now my research would be taking the direction of the qualitative map. On the other way, if I'm getting the data which is objective data, the data which is in the numbers, so since I have the numbers and I can just process those numbers, I can with the help of those numbers I can get some results. So it means that now I would be able to have the line of research which is the quantitative side. My prime here submission is that a research, whether research is quantitative or qualitative, it depends upon the type of data you can get from your respondents, right? So a research can be quantitative if you can get the data from if you can get the quantitative data from your respondents. So it means that we cannot limit the research, that qualitative research is only linked to it's only linked to the social sciences, and the quantitative research is only toward maybe the computer science or the management science. So it is the type of data which you're getting, and the way you'll be processing the data, on that it depends that whether it would be quantitative or the qualitative research. So as I told you, that all the information which we get, the way we process the information in order to get the meaningful results, that determines that whether our research would be qualitative or the quantitative. So today's our session would be focusing upon that what qualitative research is, what are the certain tools of the qualitative research which we can apply to reach on the meaningful outcomes or to address our research objectives, and what are the quantitative tools which we can apply in order on the quantitative data in order to reach on the our meaningful outcomes or the meaningful results. So let's first to just give you again to just show you. Here you can see that the quantitative data, they're numeric data in the numbers. Qualitative data, that's the text data. So it means that the data which is qualitative, it requires altogether a different approach in order to reach on the meaningful results from this data. Like, so the data which is in the text format, maybe we have to process it in the different way in order to get the meaningful results. The data which is in the numbers, we have to apply the different tools in order to reach on the meaningful results. Now, but one thing, let me tell you while explaining this types of the qualitative research. In the qualitative research, the opinion of researchers or opinion of a researcher does matter a lot. If we are conducting a qualitative research, the researchers can interpret the results according to his or her own perception, and that's why most of the qualitative research is ended up in a way that there are the conflicts among the researchers. So most of the researches which have been done in the are conducted in the qualitative format. They don't have a very conclusive kind of findings. Why? Because the different researchers have the different mindsets, and in the qualitative researches, the researcher's mindset is reflected. Whereas in the quantitative research or in the quantitative tools, researcher is a bystander and the researcher's opinion does not carry any kind of weight. So researchers have to be independent and researchers cannot interpret the results. So let's move on to the first kind of the qualitative research. Very quickly, it's the ethnography is one of the very famous type of the qualitative research through which the data is analyzed and processed. Let me tell you, in the qualitative research, it is very important that how you are getting the data, because as I told you that the researcher's opinion is very much important in the qualitative research. So that's why it's also important that how you're getting data. So that's why the processing of the data is just tied up with the way you're getting data. Like in the ethnography, ethnographer is a person in the ethnography research. Researcher himself or herself is going on the site of that particular thing in which he or she wants to conduct research, and he'll be observing, right? So ethnographer observes himself or herself the evidences, and then upon his own observations, ethnographer will lead toward the conclusion. For example, I was just recently was involved in one of the research that was related to the startups. So the researcher was himself going to the various startups, was sitting over there in those startups and was just seeing that how the people are behaving, and then he was taking notes. So after visiting 4 or 5 different startups and national incubation centers, the researcher came up with the certain elements that these are the elements which are important for the improvement of startups. So this kind of research is called the ethnographical research, and the researcher's role is ethnographer, right? For example, if in the computer science, what can happen that, like, if you have given a software to a company, like ERP software has been installed or have been given to a company. Now, what is the user friendliness of the software? To what extent the company is accepting that software? To what extent the people are happy with that software? It's very simple. One of the person can go to the companies in which the software has been installed. The researcher can sit over there, can see that how the people are behaving with the software, what are the certain reactions, and on the basis of that, the researcher can conclude that about the usability, user friendliness of the software. So this is the ethnographical research. So in the ethnography, we get the observations, we note down the observations, and those observations are then certain further processed. How they are processed, they are the observations are further all the observations or whatever memos we have taken, those memos are further divided into the various themes and sub themes in order to reach on the meaningful results. Then ethnography, after ethnography, there is a very famous other qualitative type of research is phenomenology. In the phenomenology, researcher himself may not be involved in the process, but researcher is interviewing the person who has experienced that phenomena. For example, if we are talking about the employee satisfaction, or if we are talking about the satisfaction of the people with the technological developments in the certain company. So what can be done from the phenomenological perspective, that we choose a couple of employees from that particular company and we interview them after asking various questions. Then we the whatever the data, whatever the text we are getting, that text is analyzed by converting into the themes and sub themes, and then we reach on the conclusion that okay, whether they are happy with that technology, to what extent it's contributing to their productivity, or what would be the future of this particular technology. So in the phenomenology research, which is a kind of a qualitative research, the people are the respondents who have experienced a phenomena are interviewed, and based on their interviews we move on in order to go for, or we in fact conclude our research findings. Then there's a narrative inquiry, a bit different than the phenomenology. Narrative inquiry may be a second person account. For example, a person himself was not involved in particular phenomena, that person didn't experience that phenomena, but that person was a kind of evident of that phenomena. That person was there when that phenomena was happening. For example, now this the corona accounts, maybe after 5 years or after 10 years, a researcher come to us, and then they say, then he or she asks question from us, that how the working patterns were once when the people were in the corona pandemic. So whatever our account would be, whatever we'll be telling, that would be our narrative, which will be sharing with that person. So that person would be taking our narrative. That narrative would be further divided into the various themes, mean that what are the various themes of my discussion, and then on the basis of that would be reaching on the conclusion. So narrative inquiry is the account of other persons which has seen the certain phenomena, or maybe that person has itself experienced that certain phenomena. So this is the third kind of the qualitative research. Then the fourth is the case study based research. In the case study, we take a certain unit of measurement or unit of study. For example, we can take a person, we can take any organization, we can take any maybe industry, and then all of the various informations in the case study. We are not only related to the qualitative accounts. In the case study, we also get the quantitative data, we also get the qualitative data, we also get all the accounts and data of all the procedures. So we get the 360-degree data of a particular unit, and then on the basis of that data we just further analyze and reach on the conclusion about the certain that unit which we are undertaking. So primarily you can see in these are only the four types of research which I have shared with you, although there's a long list of the qualitative research. You can read the Qualitative Inquiry and Research Design of John Creswell in order to explore more about the qualitative research. But my prime aim here is to tell you that in the qualitative research, the role of researcher is very, very important. It means that qualitative researchers have to be expert of the field, or at least have to have an idea of that particular field in order to conduct the research. To me, our faculty members, whether they are from the management science, bioscience, from computer science or engineering, we can conduct this kind of studies, but these kind of studies can be conducted with very, very carefulness, because if the researcher's bias is coming in the research, it can really affect the results. Of course, the bias of the researcher would come in the research, but if you're becoming too biased, so obviously there can be some problems. Most of our journalistic articles, the article which we read in the newspapers, or there are some of the other accounts, they are based upon the qualitative research. So this is the qualitative research, which now you can think of that in which area of your research you can apply this. Now I move toward the quantitative tools. So as I told you that in the qualitative research, the data collection and analysis are tied together, because a researcher is going to interview or getting data from the subject, And then even when you're taking the data, when you're taking the notes or memos, you are analyzing the data in your mind, and then you're reaching on certain conclusions and themes and all that. But in the quantitative sides, you have a data, you are just processing that data through certain techniques in order to reach on the results. So researchers' role is not is not there in the process of research. The most important, there are the three primarily families of techniques in the quantitative data, which I am going to share with you, although there are a very long number of the quantitative tools which we can apply to analyze our data, but three families I am sharing with you. These can be very useful while writing your research paper. First family of quantitative tool is the mean difference family. Second family is the multi-attribute data management family, and the third is the cause and effect family. The term family means that in the mean difference family there is a long list of techniques which we can apply by keeping in view the nature of the data, right? So in the quantitative research, obviously the nature of the data is very important. So here in the mean difference family, the data is of the cross-sectional nature, means that the data have been collected at the one point in time. And even in the same is in the multi-attribute data management. So data has been collected at one point in time, and that data is being analyzed or processed, so we can apply the mean difference or multi-attribute data management. But in the cause and effect, we can have the data of one point in time, which is cross-sectional. We can have the time series data or longitudinal data, and we can have the panel data. So all three formats of the data can be processed with the help of cause and effect technique. So let me tell you that what is mean difference family and what are its techniques. In fact, whenever we are comparing two groups with each other, in order to see that whether these two groups are fine, they are alike or they are different, so we are comparing multiple groups with each other, so we apply any of the mean difference family. For example, if I want to check that the male learning ability of the software is better than the females, right? So what I do, I get the data of a group of males and of a group of females, and that data is processed through independent sample t-test, which is one of the very primary tests of the mean difference family. This test will tell us that whether the females' learning ability is different than the males or not, and whether the females are better in terms of their learning ability than females, or females are better than males, or there is no difference, right? In the same way, for example, if we want to check that we have provided certain training to our employees or to our students. So what is the effect of that training? For example, there are the faculty members who are attending these sessions related to the research. So what was their level of research before attending these sessions, and what would be their level of research after attending these research sessions? So is there any significant difference coming in the levels of understanding regarding research of the faculty members before the session and after the session? So in this context, we can apply the paired sample t-test, so before intervention and after intervention. I have a couple of very interesting examples just to share with you. One example, recently one of the company, what they did, that they had an experiment in their organization. They had the two groups of the people. One group of the people were told that stress is something which is very much dangerous for the health. Stress is something once you take it can really affect your productivity. Stress is something which can really affect your physical health and a lot more. So that group was told the negative impact of the stress. There was another group who was told the positive sides of the stress, that stress can boost your mental ability. Stress is something, once you're taking stress, it's increasing your cells of brain. It's all of the great decisions have been taken under stress and all that. So what happened, that before this intervention, they took the productivity measures of the employees. Then this intervention was done, and after intervention, again, the employees were given employees' productivities were gauged. So interestingly, the employees' productivity is those employees who were told about the negative side of the stress, their productivity decreased significantly, and those employees who were told that the stress is positive thing, their productivity increased statistically. So what test was employed in order to check the productivity, whether there was any difference before intervention or after intervention? So that was the paired sample t-test, right? So in this way, if we have the more than one group, for example, if we want to check the students of 3 CGPA, the student who have the 2 CGPA, the student who have the 3 CGPA, and the student who have the 3.5 CGPA, whether the CGPA wise the attitude of the students and their commitment and their positiveness, whether that differs or not. So if there are more than 2 groups and we want to compare with each other, so then we can apply one-way analysis of variance, right? And the same way, if we have the more than one dependent variable, for example, if we want to check that whether the CGP, we have divided CGPA into 3 categories A, B, C, and we want to check the level of absenteeism, level of commitment of the students, and level of their seriousness, these 3 variables, and we want to compare by the level of CGPAs that whether the students with the higher CGPA have the higher level of commitment, attitude, and rest of those things. So we can apply one-way multivariate analysis of variance. So obviously these are the aspects which need a lot of more discussion, so I'm just leaving here because there's a very important thing which I want to share with you, with the computer science faculty members, that can be really, they can work on. So that would be coming now. But before this, I can just to show you that this mean difference family, I have come across a lot of articles of the computer science and engineering where the one-way analysis of variance, independent sample t-test, one-way MANOVA has been applied. For example, the one article which you can see in the slides, that article is one of the example of it. Okay, moving forward, the most important technique which can really help us to collaborate between the management science faculty members and the computer science, that is the multi-attribute data management technique. In the multi-attribute data management technique, the flagship technique is analytical hierarchical process. Now what it is doing, it's basically prioritizing the various elements which are related to certain criteria. For example, if you want to develop a software selection criteria and you want to keep the quality, you want to keep in mind the friendliness, the price, the availability, after sales service, so there are the certain 5-6 criteria to select the software. Obviously every criteria should not have the equal importance. Maybe the quality is more important than the price, the after sales service is more important than something else. So it means that these 5-6 criteria needs to be prioritized according to their relative importance in the software selection, and then by using this criteria we can select the ABC software, right? So in this particular case, we can apply the analytical hierarchical process, which is applied in the 4 steps. The problem is structured into hierarchy, then its pairwise comparison is conducted, and then once the after pairwise comparisons, the data is processed for calculating the eigenvalues, and then it's synthesized for the solution. So obviously this is very quick, you may not understand, to tell you that it's a very simple technique, but it can help us to collaborate cross-disciplinary topics. For example, like in the software selection criteria, we can even develop the software selection criteria for the universities in Pakistan, right? So what we can do is that we can get from the computer science experts, can get the various elements of the software, that the technical aspects which are important for the software selection. The other people from the rest of the department, they can come up with the non-technical aspects of the software selection. Then a question can be built, and that can be prioritized in order to come up with the criteria of selection of the software, which is learning management system of the university, and that criteria can be adopted by any of the other universities, right? So in this way, this multi-attribute data management technique, analytical hierarchical process, is one example. There's a Demetel ANP, fuzzy ANP, gray Demetel ANP. So it has again a long series of techniques which can be helpful for which are even applied everywhere, irrespective of any discipline. I have a couple of articles, especially from the computer science and engineering, where the AHP has been applied. So you can just see these articles. For example, an application of the modular capability based ERP software selection using AHP method, right? Or the implementing of operating system selection using AHP entropy. So for the developing of the selection criteria, we can use this AHP system. Even for the project management, for selection of the project sites, or for the selection of simple material, or for the supplier selections, we can apply AHP. Even for the human resource selection in the HR field, we can apply AHP. For example, a university or an organization can develop a criteria giving the weightage, and then employee can be screened through that particular criteria in order to select for the selection of the right employee. So the last technique is our cause and effect technique. Cause and effect is a very simple classical regression given by the Galton Francis, which the X affects Y. So most of our secondary data and all of our techniques on this, where X is affecting Y, they are on the regression analysis based. We have three types of techniques. In the cross-sectional data, we have a structural equation modeling, in which if we have a many variables, for example, I want to check that how the salary and the HR practices and a lot other things are affecting the employee's motivation, so I can apply the structural equation modeling, right? Or there are the lot of dependent and independent variables, and we are getting the data at one point in time, so we can apply structural equation modeling. There's another very interesting field which is in the machine learning, I guess in the computer science. All the algorithms, a lot of algorithms are, and in the ERP systems, a lot of the algos and programs are developed on using that criteria. Those are the autoregressive moving average, ARIMA, and co-integration approaches. For example, if I want to develop an algorithm for forecasting of the gold price, so a lot of people say that the gold price is heavily dependent upon its past prices. So by observing the behavior of the series, that how that series have behaved, and by modeling that behavior of the series, we can develop a model in order to forecast the prices. Or a lot of stock prices and the commodity prices are in fact forecasted in this kind of models. And again, to make it a very comprehensive, we can also include the other factors which can affect the prices. And that kind of, now what happens that we at the management science, we are in fact just doing a research that this can affect to this one, and these are the certain phenomena. But for the algorithms for development of the computer programs, obviously the people from the computer science or the other fields, they have to come in. Like for example, if I develop a criteria, if I develop a technique which forecasts the stock prices. Now, in order to institutionalize that particular method, or in order to apply that method into a practical field, I need a kind of a software. That software has to be developed by the other discipline, that's computer science. They have to develop the software, and that software we can share with the stock or with the rest of the people. So in the cause and effect, again, this can offer a very fantastic venues of the cross collaborations, in which we can, for example, we can find certain solutions to the phenomena, and those solutions can be developed or encoded in the software. Like let's say if there is a very famous need for the demand forecasting softwares, like we can identify a lot of factors which affects the demand, as to how those factors should be modeled in the software to take the real data for forecasting the demand. We can connect with the computer science. Now at the time of Corona, there's a the great problem which the firms are facing is the supply chain visibility and supply chain mapping, so that from where the certain materials are coming, whether those areas are the lockdown areas, what are their geographical distances, what would be the alternative transportation methods. So we can, with the collaboration with the computer science, we can develop certain softwares or the algorithms which can offer us the various alternative modes of transportation, which can help us to visualize through the graphical what we call it geopositioning. Through geopositioning, we can get our suppliers visibility. So to me, this coronavirus affected a lot of things. It has also provided opportunity for us to collaborate on the various things, and these techniques, you can see that they can offer us a very aspiring venues for the collaboration. Then we have a panel data technique in which the cross-sectional and the time series data are merged, and for the industry level analysis, this kind of techniques are applied. In a nutshell, now what are the venues for the collaboration? Just for the sake of example, like a selection of software and hardware for the blockchain based supply chain. What would be the criterias? What would be the technical aspects? What would be the relative weightage? I'm just giving you an example from my area that this can be a one venue. Algorithm development for the supplier selection based on MADM technique. A lot of companies, for example, we can develop a very small algorithm or software for the small and medium enterprise, which is not very expensive, but simply they have a system in place. They have to simply put the various elements in that software, and then they are putting the suppliers in, and they can get the best supplier. Right. The same way from the qualitative side, even we can check for the techno work environment and its impacts upon the employee well-being, because now as the things are moving on toward the technology, this techno work environment has negative offshoots as well on the psychological well-being of the employees. So you being the computer scientists, being the developers, being the people who are helping the technology to take in place in the organizations, they have to see that how the technology which they are implementing in the organizations, how that is affecting or that's having a negative or the positive offshoots on this well-being. So once if a developer is aware of the various psychological effects, maybe he or she can come up with a better solution. So these are some of the venues in which we can also do research. I tried to give a very, very broad brush. I can understand that I may not be I may not have gone into very much detail through which you could have understood more about the concept, but my aim was to just to show you the various aspects which can be of useful for the further reading. I have a couple of material you can also get from me. I can and even I would appreciate that we can come together to have a kind of these collaborations. Obviously nothing is free from the flaws, but at least we have to start this cross-discipline collaboration in order to come up with some better things. Thank you very much.